These are exciting times.
Yeah.
Can you just help everyone understand the timing and the regulatory hurdles? Viral gene therapy had a moment where there were setbacks, and just share that with everyone, how that's affected, how this technology has been held back, how it's progressing now, and what timelines generally look like for getting these breakthroughs to market.
Absolutely. So today, if you were to start a brand new gene therapy company called Siren Biotechnology or anything else, and you wanted to develop a viral gene therapy and you wanted to get to clinic, you're still probably looking for that first program in like a 10 to 15 year mark. And it's not because it's going to take you that long to run the clinical trials. It's not because it's going to take you that long to grow up the vats of the drug. It's mostly going to be a regulatory timeline. So in between each one of these clinical trials, even before you do your very first ones, I mean, we're ready today. We could start our brain cancer clinical trial today, but we're looking at 18 months of paperwork in order to file to do that first phase 1, and then you need to do your data readouts. In between each one of those trials, there's this kind of massive amount of paperwork that goes in front of the FDA that needs to be reviewed, and there's back and forths. And so the regulatory hurdles, both from if you weren't even doing anything, really drastic like those last 3 vignettes that I talked about, is still going to be 10 to 15 years. But if you wanted to propose something like the sleep one that I mentioned, that I think I'm certainly interested in, there you're probably looking at an ethical review board and whether or not they'd let you do something like that, because that's not a disease. So fun fact, the FDA only lets you queue up clinical trials to test drugs that are for diseases. But aging is not a disease state. Wanting to sleep fewer hours is not a disease state. Insomnia is, but wanting to just sleep fewer hours and be fully rested is not a disease state. So we kind of have to get to this moment where does the FDA start changing their definition of disease? Do we have a new regulatory body who will review these types of things that are more like augmentations and enhancements? How are we going to grapple with this as a society? Are we okay with this?
And let me just ask one more question. It's a great question you posed, because there is increasing consensus that maybe we should think about aging itself as a disease, obviously, and that there's a lot of approaches now to addressing that. What about the other challenges to completing the research and the trials and scalability? What are the bottlenecks? I've talked on our show about CAR T therapy and the challenge in getting manufacturing scaled up to treat enough patients each year. Even though the technology's here, it's FDA approved, those drugs are in market, we just can't make enough.
Yep.
What are the and I've heard a lot about lentivirus production and all these other kind of viral vectors being 18-month delays, super bottlenecked. How bottlenecked are we in being able to do the research that you guys are doing and ultimately to get these products to market and make enough of the stuff to treat patients?
So the single biggest bottleneck is actually not technological at all. It's financial. It's access to capital, right? So these are, like I said, very, very capital intensive. The average viral gene therapy is about $2 to $3 billion. That's about 3 times more than making one of those chemical medicines. Some of that has to do with time, how long that process takes, right? Every year your company is operating. That G&A, it's expensive. It adds up really fast. And so some of this is just access to capital. And there's, any company, every one of us in this room has a company, depending on your sector, there's a valley of death. For some of you, it's very, very early stage. For some of you, it's a little bit more later stage, but there's a valley of death where you just can't access capital before you hit this big de-risking milestone where the bigger checks will come in and private equity and those types of groups and crossover funds in your IPO. So there's a valley of death for many of these early stage companies where usually either after your seed stage or your Series A, but before you've got clinical trial readouts, where people are very nervous to give you a really big check. So that's certainly the biggest hurdle right now and why you see many companies going under across the biotech space, regardless of if they're selling gene therapies. And then from the technological side, it's still manufacturing is just like the drumbeat. Being able to manufacture these things at scale continues to be a challenge. We need folks who come from the mechanical engineering and these types of backgrounds who don't historically necessarily think of biotech as a place where they could apply their knowledge and technologies to please come over to biotech and help us make new generations of bioreactors and types of things that will allow us to produce these at scale cleanly, cheaply, and easily. And it's just not intuitive. Making chemicals at scale is something that we've been doing for 40 years, so we're really good at it. Genentech can make kilos of drugs in an afternoon with a robot. But viruses are still something like if I queue up the biggest CDMO in the world, Catalent Pharma, and ask them to make us a 5,000-liter bioreactor of virus, they'll absolutely say yes, but they won't even touch it for 2.5 years. Because
I wanted to double-click on the concept of making life better for people who aren't sick. The Marty Seligman from the American Psychological Association actually posed this question 20 years ago, and he said, what we try to make all of psychology and psychiatry is taking depressed people and anxious people and making them less depressed and anxious. What about meaning and fulfillment for people who are content? What about more joy? And so when you look at the field, and it's amazing the progress you're making, and thank you for doing all that work. Aside from, hey, can we sleep less? What else is, do you talk about, wow, if we had the mandate to take healthy people and give them a gift of augmenting them, making them into superheroes almost, when we're talking about like X-Men mutations here, what are the fun things that you dream about that you could do for humanity? Could we all just have vision like hawks or?
Oh, night vision is totally possible.
Night vision?
Yeah, easy.
Literally without the goggles?
Yeah, easy.
I mean, a world in which
That's just an FDA, like, I need the green light, but no, that's easy.
So, okay, that feels like Professor X kind of level shit. I like it. What else you got? Keep going.
Night vision would be possible, the ability to metabolize a food that grows perhaps in a different environment that not only you can't get any nutrients from, but you can't even absorb it. So we could make it so that you could, pretend Soylent tasted good. You could eat anything, and not only could it taste good to you, but it could provide you all the nutrients that you need and be able to grow with, much less water and in the types of environments that we'll have in the future planet that, given the climate change challenges that we all have. As far as other augmentations, I mean, there's all of the obvious beauty applications that I think all of us are already doing. Now we'd just be doing this with a different modality, right? So removing, there's a gene therapy company in San Diego working on male pattern baldness. There are folks working on, all the wrinkles and cellulite and, getting your hair color back and like all of the normal beauty things that you would expect. That's absolutely coming. But as far as beyond the obvious beauty things, like what other types of augmentations, I think the mental health space is a huge one because it's usually a very, very simple thing. I mean, it's complex, but it's simple. They're usually missing a single receptor or a single protein somewhere in their brain, and if we were just able to restore that for them in just that location and not everywhere in their body, you could restore joy, you could restore happiness, all of these types of things.
That's fascinating.
Do you want to talk about the capital markets piece? Because you mentioned you need capital.
Yeah, we're fundraising. Hi.
Yeah. And Chamath, maybe you can help out here, but the biotech market's been decimated.
Oh yeah.
Since November of 21, and it's really intricately linked to interest rates because of how far out you have to make a bet on a biotech company, and so as a result, the valuations have plummeted 80-90% in many cases, and a lot of stuff's just not getting funded right now.
Yep.
Maybe Chamath, you can share your point of view on where things are headed there. And Nicole, maybe you can share a little bit about what the experience has been fundraising, even though you have a great technology that's got some proof points, how hard it is.
Well, I have a kind of a technical question, but which is just, when you picked AAV, you had to make a decision about small edits and not large edits, I guess, right? So just explain to these guys about what payloads are actually possible in AAV, and are you thinking about what happens if you actually have to go beyond 4 kb, and how are you going to solve that? Because a lot of the diseases that these guys will actually probably understand are not small SNPs. They're going to be large,
So
cut and paste.
Two types of gene therapy. There's gene transfer gene therapy, where we give you the whole gene that you were missing, like perhaps you were missing that portion of your chromosome at birth. So that's gene transfer gene therapy. We're literally transferring a functional copy of the gene back to you. And then there's gene editing gene therapy, where we go in and actually correct a mutation in place within your genome and don't give you anything extra. So every virus on the planet has a carrying capacity. It has a size, just like a sedan can't carry as much as a minivan. And so AAV viruses, the viruses that I work on, are amongst one of the smaller viruses. So it can only package about 4.75 kb. So the numbers of nucleotides that you can fit inside of it, and different viruses have larger packaging capacities and can fit more stuff, more
That's
packages inside.
4,700 letters of DNA.
Yeah. And so different viruses will have different packaging capacities. And so if you're doing gene transfer gene therapy, where you need to provide the entire copy of the gene, you can only put in genes that will fit with all of the other regulatory elements for expression within that virus. So of all protein coding genes, since we're typically going after diseases that are influencing a protein, of all protein coding genes, 80% of those genes can fit within my virus. So actually the vast majority of genetic diseases can be treated with AAV gene therapy, with gene transfer gene therapy. With gene editing gene therapy, we can treat anything, because now we're not size limited. We only need to deliver either the nicker or the cutter, right? Many of you have heard of things like CRISPR. That's one of the many tools we can use to nick or cut DNA. And we can either make a nick and have your body repair the mutation. We can go in and make a nick or a cut, and we can cut something out that wasn't supposed to be there, or we can go in and nick or cut something in your genome, cut something out, and then put something that was meant to be there the whole time back in. All three of those forms, those gene repairs and gene edits, are all kind of broadly classified as gene editing gene therapy, and all of those would fit within any virus.
There's a high percentage of disease, I don't know the percentage, you probably know, which is really just like 1 point mutation, right?
Yeah. Huge
Transcribe AC or something is typically the biggest one, right? Can you just explain to folks when you think the tool chain will exist for us to do those single point edits and actually just...
Today.
You can actually go in and accurately rewrite an A to a C?
Okay, today.
There's a few in
there's
trials
some in
and
clinical
almost
trials
approved. Yeah. Guys, we got to wrap, and I want to really thank Dr. Nicole Paulk for her amazing work and for joining us here today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. You got a nice standing ovation.